So I've had the Sony a7 III for just about 2 weeks now, and I've got a chance to use it on a bunch of YouTube videos. I've used it on a couple of weddings. I've used it on gimbal work. I used it on some of my commercial work. I've used quite a bit, and it's a pretty outstanding little camera. And I want to tell you about kind of what my thoughts are after having it for 2 solid weeks. So in case you are new around here, my name is Scott and I am a filmmaker, and I own a video production company called 4LC Studios, and our primary cameras that we use on almost every single shoot are GH5s and GH5Ss. We've been using these cameras for about a year and they've just been outstanding for us. So this is not a review of the GH5S, this is a review of the a7 III. We recently picked up an a7 III, primarily actually for this YouTube channel. We picked it up more for the behind the scenes content that we had. We wanted a camera that would be really, really good with autofocus, good with low light, and a camera that we could hand somebody and let them just get behind the scenes stuff that we want. That's primarily the reason we picked up the camera. And then of course, after you pick up a camera, you test a little bit, you see what it does well, see what it doesn't do so well. You end up sometimes using it for more than just the initial kind of idea you had purchased it for. Before switching to the GH5s as our primary cameras, we were all Sony users for a while. We used a7S IIs, so we had 3 of them, 4 of them at one point. We had some a6500s. We were all Sony all the time, and they were good overall cameras, but the reliability issue, the battery life, all those things just made it not super usable, so we moved away from Sony entirely, went to the GH5 line. Those have been great, but this camera intrigued us because of a couple of different reasons, and those are kind of the things I want to highlight of specifically what has really separated this camera from even our previous experience with Sony in the past. First off, the absolute best feature on this camera, literally the reason we purchased the camera, and I think where it shines the strongest, is the autofocus. The autofocus system in the Sony a7 III is just unbelievably fast. It's accurate, it's usable even in professional settings, and it has just proven to be as good as we hoped it would be. The a7S II that we had was a contrast-based detection, kind of like the GH5, so it just is not very reliable. You can never really count on it. Then we had the a6500s for a little just for autofocus. Those were really good with autofocus as well, but this whole new autofocus system with even more autofocus points is just incredible. It literally doesn't ever miss focus on what you're usually trying to capture it on. The only times it'll occasionally grab the wrong thing is at a wedding if you're using face detection and you're doing a first dance and there's tons of people in the background, it'll sometimes hop around. But if you keep center point autofocus on, it just does a phenomenal job of just grabbing that and never ever losing it. If you are looking for a camera that has unbelievable autofocus, the a7 III, I don't really think there's anything better. Now, one thing we were absolutely not a fan of with the Sonys, especially the a6500, but even the a7S II as well, is the battery life on the Sonys was just never good. It was extremely small little batteries that just lasted barely an hour, and you'd always be changing batteries. We used to carry 9 to 12 batteries on a wedding day. We'd go through them constantly. We'd have to recharge them. It just was kind of a nightmare. The battery system was not good at all. They finally upgraded that in the a7 III. They upgraded in the a7 IX, and obviously they'll continue to use it. They upgraded to a double the capacity battery, and it is a huge sigh of relief because these finally actually get decent battery life. We can go just as long as we basically do with our GH5s, almost 2 hours of recording it feels like. I can't give you an exact amount, but it seems like it lasts a good amount of time. We've shot entire wedding ceremonies with it and it still had 30%, 40% battery life, so that's a huge thing. If you previously owned any of the models that had the little NP50 battery, you know what a nightmare the actual battery system was in Sony's. So them improving that was a huge deal, and really good. Now, in terms of low light, Sony has been one of the leaders for a while now in low light, so there was no doubt to me that the a7 III was going to be a continuation of just great low light cameras, and without question it is. I did a video all about that if you want to watch the video comparing this to the actual GH5S in low light. The low light on this is very good. We got up to 100,000 ISO before it actually was like completely unusable, and we never ever need to even go to that kind of extreme. We just did it for testing, but literally anything under 50,000 ISO was extremely clean and usable. We did notice the color got a little bit different as it kind of got up in the ISOs, as you can see in that low light test that I did, but overall phenomenal low light camera for the price especially. It is obviously a full frame camera, so we expected that. It's a Sony, we expected it to have good low light, and it definitely does. In terms of the overall feel of the camera, I think it absolutely feels like the best Sony that we've ever used. If you are familiar with the A9, which came out recently, then you are familiar with this body because they basically made it identical to the A9. But if you're previously coming from the A7S II or A6500, it feels so much better the way that it feels in your hand. The placement of buttons, they finally got rid of the record button over here. The record button is now back here in a convenient location at your thumb, which of course we've been waiting for years. You can still route to the shutter button, which we also do, but it's just in a nice convenient location. The dials feel better. The body itself feels better. Just, it feels well built. It feels like a solid camera. It just is nice to use, comfortable in the hand, and overall build quality outstanding for a $2,000 camera. There's also a brand new little joystick here instead of the previous model of the joystick. This one is much easier to use, and this is all touchscreen as well. So if you're coming from the A7S line, you obviously know that there was never an actual touchscreen. This is, so you can actually touch the focus. You can kind of do all the things you'd expect in a touchscreen, which is a welcome change because a lot of the other Sonys haven't had that, and it's nice finally being able to utilize that. Another thing they added, which everybody knew was coming, but luckily, great thing, dual SD card slots. If you are used to having dual SD cards on any other camera, or if you're not used to having them, you will absolutely love this. Being able to either have them simultaneously record backups is really nice. You can also have the second card slot actually record proxies if you want to be able to edit quicker while having really high quality footage like 4K on the main card. You can do that. You can have backup recordings. You can have a relay that when one fills up, it goes to the next one. Just a great feature. All our GH5s have these already, but this was something that we knew was coming to Sony, and it's good that they put it in this body. Now, in terms of color science, this is always something that Sony has kind of been known to somewhat struggle in. People love the out-of-camera look from Canon. People really have liked the out-of-camera look from the GH5 and GH5S line, but Sony has always struggled with kind of having a good out-of-camera look. They always naturally have had a little bit of a green tint that you sometimes have to do some work to get out in post, and it's just naturally hard to get as much of a clean and just straight out of camera good image. Now they have lots of great super flat profiles, so obviously you get lots of dynamic range in these cameras and they're really great for color grading, but it's naturally something that people have complained about a lot on these cameras is just their actual color science. I do think it has gotten a lot better with the A7 III than the A7S II and especially the A6500. I think it's becoming much better looking at a camera. Like anything, there are certain things you get used to, certain profiles you get used to, certain shifts in color you get used to, and you kind of just set up profiles that work for that. But they still haven't made it perfect. I still do think that the cameras that I get best color out of are Canon, and the GH5 line I think is just the most accurate color for what we look for. But it has definitely gotten better, and I think that they're continuing to make good steps in the right direction to be able to get a decent look directly out of camera, which I think is really important because if I can save some time in post by getting the color that I want out of camera, it really helps. Now, where Sony has had the biggest issues is overheating. Their cameras have been notoriously known to overheat when shooting video, and this is literally the reason we changed from Sony to Panasonic in the first place. We were tired of having to worry about whether the camera was going to continue to shoot without overheating on an important event like a wedding or a commercial shoot that we do. So the question is, have they improved it with the A7 III? I can't say that I've done extensive enough shooting with it yet to actually know how reliable it would be in the heat of the summer outdoors while shooting a full ceremony. I have used it on 3 weddings and I've had no overheating issues whatsoever. One of the weddings was outside, but it was not terribly hot, and the ceremony was only about 25 minutes long, so I definitely wouldn't expect it to overheat for that. I've used it on a couple of indoor ceremonies. I've had no issues with it there, but they haven't been super hot inside. One of the ceremonies was about an hour and 20 minutes though, and I didn't get any overheating issues or any warnings at that, so that's a huge improvement because there have been times in the past that I would get overheating issues without question under an hour, even in ideal, nice indoor ceremonies. So it definitely seems like they've improved it. They do give you the option to be able to put the sensitivity on when it tells you it's going to overheat to high or low, so you can kind of make it go a little bit longer and you'll just feel it get warmer and warmer, but it won't necessarily shut off. So that's good. So I can't say I've tested it extensively. I can't say whether they fixed it entirely, but I do shoot everything in 4K, and I'm just glad that all the time I have shot in 4K so far, I haven't seen the warning yet on this camera. So it's good to see that they're somewhat trying to improve that. Hopefully they'll continue to make good strides in making sure that that doesn't happen. Of course, as soon as I posted this video on my YouTube channel, tons of people said, we can't wait to see your video of you switching back to Sony and using the a7 III as my primary camera for all the stuff. And the answer to that question, for those wondering if I'm gonna make the switch and go to all Sony a7 IIIs, the answer is no. Not a chance whatsoever. We still love our GH5s and the GH5S. We've gotten so used to some of the incredible features out of the GH5 and GH5S, like unlimited recording time and 4K 60 frames and up to 240 frames a second in slow-mo. Just a really, really incredibly reliable camera that it's really hard once you have a camera that does that kind of stuff to be able to ever not use that camera again. So while we do think that this is gonna play a really vital role in some of the jobs that we do, specifically jobs that we really need autofocus for, I think this is an incredible camera that we can add to our arsenal. Primarily, like I said from the start, this is really used for BTS and for vlogs and things that I can utilize the autofocus for. And anytime I know I need to make sure that I have killer autofocus for some sort of commercial job or something where I might be doing gimbal work and making sure I'm tracking a subject, I would always reach for this before the GH5s. But when it comes to other things, color science, 4K 60 frames, unlimited recording time, all the things I love about the GH5 and GH5S, they haven't yet made that possible in Sony. And even when the a7S III comes out, a lot of those things still won't be solved. I know they'll have 4K 60, I don't doubt that one bit. But if I can't really trust the camera to be super reliable and it still doesn't have some of the features that are important to me, I'm not sure if I'm ready to jump ship as of yet. So for now, I'm not leaving all my GH5 and GH5Ss. I'm sticking with those. We love what they do for us. But this camera, I cannot recommend enough. For $2,000, I think this is an outstanding camera, outstanding body. It's got everything you'd really want in a camera, including full frame. For $2,000, it just is really, really a great camera. So that's kind of my review so far on using it. I hope this was helpful to you. If you like this video and you want to see more reviews of cameras, hit that subscribe button. I do a lot of this type of content, just trying to provide any value I can. As I test things, which I like to do a lot, I like to let you know what I think, so it might be able to help you as you make your decision into what's the best camera for you. So thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys real soon.